Hello, fellow lovers of good opera singing, and welcome to another review on my channel. No perle nere this time. Even though I go to the opera fairly often, it is impossible to catch bad performances on a regular basis. But that's a good thing, I'm sure you agree. Today I want to talk to you about Turandot, or more precisely, the one that is currently playing at the Dutch National Opera in Amsterdam. It caught my attention for multiple reasons. Number one, the cast seemed interesting enough. Lots of young people, including a Liu who just recently won a famous major competition, and a tenor whom I heard previously and happened to like quite a bit. Number two, the papers unanimously praised director Barrie Kosky's staging as a revelation. The riddle of Turandot, so they wrote, was solved and Turandot was finally exposed as an opera full of fascist aesthetics. Fancy that. Turandot is one of my favorite operas, so I could not miss out on that one. The cast of the performance at hand goes as follows. Turandot, Tamara Wilson, Calaf, Martin Mühle, Liu, Juliana Grigorian, Timur, Alexei Kulagin, Lorenzo Viotti, conductor. The stage was designed by Michael Levine. Barrie Kosky was the stage director. Tamara Wilson is an American soprano who sings mostly Wagner and heavier Verdi roles. She received the Richard Tucker Award in 2016. But while her singing wasn't that bad, back in 2016 she has apparently done everything necessary to disimprove it during the past years. Her voice is loud, metallic, and she can hit all the high notes. That being said, the timbre is quite faceless. Her voice is afflicted by a distinctive wobble and lacks the necessary charisma for the role of Turandot. Or for any role, for that matter. Are there any roles that would ask for a metallic and wobbly voice with little charisma? I don't know any. Miss Wilson is a prime example of modern casting practice. They hire who can hit the top notes, even if the sound isn't pretty. Personally, I would rather have a charismatic voice with a difficult top, like Di Stefano or Tebaldi, than one that can sing everything but leaves you cold. Regarding her interpretation, there is nothing much to say. Her Turandot did not sound like the troubled yet irresistibly attractive young woman Turandot is supposed to be. Only occasionally she would sing below mezzo forte, and when singing louder, she quickly became monotonous. Don't get me wrong, her performance wasn't nasty, but I would not get tickets in order to hear her. Nothing much can be said on her acting, as in Kosky's version, Turandot never appears on stage. In this production she is nothing but an idea, a mirage, an amplified one, to be precise. But more about that later. Turandot's opponent Calaf was sung by Martin Mühle, who created a very believable portrayal of the unknown prince. He knew the drama, he knew the role, he knew when he was singing what and why. And if you think this is a matter of course, all I can say is quite the contrary. It's the exception to the rule. His timbre is very distinctive and instantly recognizable, and I mean that in a very positive way. The voice is romantic, yet manly, and able of big heroic gestures. It's well produced, well projected, ringing. It's a true spinto voice. In my opinion, his is one of the most beautiful and best tenor voices around. Mühle sang with great musicality, dynamics, and that kind of old-school flavor so many are looking for, that so few can describe, and even fewer can achieve. I much appreciate that he has stayed true to the tenor he was born with. There is no artificial darkening, no woofiness. He allows his timbre to shine, with all its inherent beauty and charm. He delivered both arias beautifully and hit the high Cs in Act 2 with authority. When listening to him, however, I got the impression that he somewhat got his wings clipped. He could have done more, I thought, but it seemed that he wasn't allowed to. But more about that later. Liu was sung by the young Armenian soprano Juliana Grigorian. She has won the first prize in Domingo's Operalia competition just a month ago. She sports a very attractive, dark-hued lyric soprano voice, whose layout reminds a bit of Mirella Freni. It suited the role, even though I personally would prefer a more lightweight Liu, vocally speaking. For her age, her voice is surprisingly mature, and I'm pretty sure we won't hear her singing Liu for long. She will probably soon go over to singing Mimi and Chocho-san. But I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't want to see yet another young talent sing the big roles too early, expand the center of her voice, develop a pensioner's wobble by the age of 30, and disappear in the vast grayness of operatic mediocrity. So please be smart and handle your beautiful instrument with care. Alexei Kulagin's Timur was alright, even though his voice seemed a bit out of focus. And even his voice showed signs of a wobble that he should not have at his young age. Lastly, Ping, Pong and Pong. They all did a decent job. Their attempts to sing the great trio in Act 2 pianissimo as demanded by Puccini, however, resulted in quite a few poorly supported notes. Lorenzo Viotti is currently being hyped as the new superstar among conductors. Viotti is the new Kurenzis. He can be seen in fancy promo videos where he not only looks cool but also tells a certain audience exactly what they want to hear.
Italy. Passionate. Passionate.
His conducting, however, did not sound much like Italian passion. Quite the contrary. He marched through the score as if driven by an invisible metronome. He never gave the singer space to breathe and shine, as if he wanted to say, I am the star here, not you. High notes were cut short and often the ensembles were rushed. On top of that, Viotti gave very few cues. Excellent ego conducting by Mr. Viotti, if you ask me. The award for the evening's biggest ego, however, goes to Barrie Kosky, the stage director who added a few significant changes to the piece. These changes were, as he said, motivated by his wish to show what Puccini really wanted and what Turandot really was about. Keep that in mind. The basic idea of his Turandot was that Turandot does not exist, and that she was nothing but a collective dream.
I was very drawn to a line that Ping Pang and Pong sing in the first act to Calaf. They say Turandot non existe, Turandot doesn't exist.
Kosky's Turandot has, accordingly, no physical appearance on stage. His Turandot is hidden and sings from somewhere else. What he does not tell us is that the concept was not his, but one created by Philipp Stölzel, who staged a similar Turandot at the Berlin State Opera this summer.
Ich fand spannend, dass dieses Gefühl der Liebe, was die Calaf da treibt, und das ist ja der Hauptplotpoint der Oper, dass das natürlich nur eine Projektion ist. Da war für mich so ein Schlüssel aufgegangen. Du sagst, du hast eigentlich eine sozusagen Göttin, die da gar nicht richtig existiert, sondern nur angebetet wird als Ritual oder als Mythos.
All I can say is, when you sell us something as new, make sure it actually is. Every act starts with a spoken, or rather whispered intro, reminiscent of Bartók's Bluebeard. And after Liu's suicide, the whispering returns to end the opera. There is no finale at all. Quote, Lorenzo, Viotti and I have talked about the ending a lot, and we came up with the idea for something new, some sort of epilogue in which the collective wakes up from its dream as though Liu's death has broken something. For this epilogue, we will be using elements of the Italian text, but there will be no music to accompany it. End of quote. The reason for cancelling the finale, according to Kosky, was in Puccini's best interest. Kosky found both Alfano's and Berio's finales to be too far from what Puccini had in mind for the opera's end, reason enough to have the opera end after Liu's death. Kosky also has a few other musical arguments for justifying his modern radical approach. According to him, he was only working Puccini's best intentions, as Turandot was a U-turn for Puccini, an opera where Puccini had abandoned his realistic verismo approach and engaged in a modern dreamy fairy tale.
What makes the piece fascinating is that it's clearly a radical experiment of Giacomo Puccini. Puccini rejected everything that he'd been working on for all his life. The realism, the psychological complexity, the melodrama, it's all gone. He decided then to embark upon a musical language, which is almost a complete rejection of the verismo that he'd been working on all his life.
Puccini and verismo, that sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? Verismo is per definition a contemporary plot depicting a lower-class drama in the south of Italy, Cavalleria Rusticana being the most prominent example. And yes, Puccini did use a few lower-class plots, but none of them played in Italy. And it's exactly the exotic color of places far away that characterize La Bohème students at Montmartre, Il Tabarro's workers by the Seine River, or La Fanciulla's coal miners of California. This was clearly no verismo. Furthermore, Puccini's first opera Le Villi had already been a kind of fairy tale, and those operas of his that do take place in Italy, such as Tosca, Suor Angelica, and Gianni Schicchi, all have historic plots. So it's safe to say that Kosky's musical justifications missed their mark. And if Kosky was so keen on staging what Puccini wanted, why did he ban Turandot from stage and equip her with a microphone? And why did they add the whispering and the scream that probably made you jump, my apologies, which aren't in the score? Why did they not give us an uncut Act 2? Why did they eliminate the chorus's reaction right after Leo's suicide? All of that is hardly true to Puccini's ideas, and thus referring to Puccini's interest just seems like a pretext, as it usually is when directors try to justify their ideas. But we digress. In my opinion, the idea of Turandot being a dream does have its charm. It poses the question of how one should get through life, dreaming or with both feet on the ground. In Act 1, the realist and the dreamer clash. La vita c'è laggiù, says Timur. Life is over there. To which Calaf replies, Questa è la vita, padre. No, life is here. So far so good. But what kind of a dream is it Calaf is dreaming? In Puccini's original, it's a dream of love and conquest. It's a macho dream, so to say. Puccini wanted Calaf to win and release Turandot from her trauma by means of a modern French kiss, as Puccini put it. Kosky, however, wants it differently. The stage is mostly cold, dark, and littered with symbols of death. Turandot's henchmen are wearing combat boots with white shoelaces. And judging from these symbols, Kosky wants Turandot to represent a fascistic dictatorial ideology, and Calaf falls for it. This is where the staging becomes political. Since Calaf falls for fascist ideology, it is a matter of course for Kosky that he should not win, which is the real reason for why the finale has been cancelled. Puccini's vision of the happy ending clashes with Kosky's reading of Turandot as fascist ideology. He could have let him win and make the couple establish a fascist regime, as Lorenzo Fioroni did in the Deutsche Oper in Berlin a few years ago. But instead, Kosky chose to become a mainstream moralizer and cancel the finale. One should, so his message, not be like Calaf. One should not fall for right-wing ideas. These ideologies kill, no matter if Puccini wanted a happy ending or not. These are not the only political issues that played a major role in Kosky's staging. Turandot representing a, quote, Western cliché of China, unquote, and the debate if one should continue staging Turandot or ban it entirely due to its alleged cultural appropriation always lingered in the background. This is not a joke, and Kosky solved the problem by cancelling anything Chinese on stage. And I guess we can consider us lucky that the Chinese motifs haven't been erased from the score. Don't they realize that all of this banning and cancelling, this ideological cleansing, represents the very ideology they pretend to reject? Ask yourselves, whose feelings will be hurt more? Those of the opera lovers around the world once you have cancelled the piece, or those of Chinese people when you keep performing it? Until now, I do not know of any Chinese person who has ever complained about cultural appropriation in Turandot. Michael Levine's stage design, combined with Alessandro Carletti's lighting, was beautiful. Turandot, as an illusion, just had to be, you guessed it, all smoke and mirrors. The stage was mostly completely empty, except for a huge skull that dominated most of Act 2. Something very similar, though, had been done by Stölzel, where the stage was almost equally empty. There, Turandot was represented by a huge puppet on strings.
Philipp Stölzel hat einen Trickfilmer in seinem Team, der die gesamte Oper animiert hat. Und aus dieser Animation her hat uns der Kollege Daten ausgelesen. Und mit diesen Daten konnte ich dann die Grundlage für unsere Maschinerie schaffen.
A funny coincidence, isn't it? Especially since Kosky had been the general manager of an opera house that is located just a few hundred meters from the opera house where Stölzel's staging was playing. But on y soit qui mal y pense. Really beautiful was the beginning of Act 3, where Calaf sings his famous aria. Here, the stage was lit by candles. The mirrors and the well-choreographed extras created a stunning kaleidoscopic effect, which was really nice. Among the wittier ideas was Calaf hitting his head instead of striking the tam-tam in the Act 1 finale. A last attempt to get the illusion out of his head, I guess. In Act 2, he crawls into the skull's open mouth, a final surrender to the deadly idea that obsesses him. Other than that, nothing much happened. The direction was static, and all too often the protagonists mingled with the chorus and got out of sight, since they were dressed in the same grey attire. The chorus, on the other hand, moved a lot, illustrating the rhythms of the music with choreographed dancing. In my book, this resembled a Rocky Horror Picture Show rather than an opera, and if it was made to make the direction appear less static, it wasn't a very original idea. If it was made to ridicule the music and the plot, which is very well possible, it was just very 80s, so to say, nothing more, and was certainly not in Puccini's interest. To finish, a few words on why this production might have been perceived as unfriendly to singers. Number 1, banning Turandot from stage creates great difficulties for the performers. The soprano cannot communicate with the other musicians. She cannot communicate with her audience, which adds to the difficulty of a part which is already static and problematic enough. It leaves poor Calaf alone and turns the confrontation in Act 2 into a solo act, which must be incredibly hard for any tenor to perform. The chemistry between the artists, as well as between the artists and their audience, is incredibly important and is an inherent part of music making. Number 2. Kosky had all the intermissions cut, which puts a greater strain on the singers, especially on the tenor, who gets no break at all between the riddle scene and Nessun Dorma. Number 3. The chamber they created by enclosing everything in mirrored walls was extremely singer unfriendly. Everyone who knows a thing or two about acoustics knows that a chorus will overpower everyone when placed inside such an environment. But for Kosky, this was not a problem, as he described the chorus to be the motor of the piece. Number 4. Viotti's conducting must have felt like singing to a backing track. He conducted as if he was the protagonist, and as if the singers had to accompany him, and not the other way around. I find it alarming that so many things can come together in one single production. Was there nobody to speak up? The press has unanimously praised this production, no word about the impossible conditions. Turandot is hard enough to sing the way it is. There is no need to make life even harder for the performers on stage. This production is still a lot better and more interesting than the Tosca I reviewed in my last video, and I would, in spite of everything, recommend it. The concept is somewhat interesting, the staging a sight to behold, even if it has little to do with Puccini. You'll get the chance to hear Mr. Mühle and the young Miss Grigorian. Both are well worth a ticket. But let's not fool ourselves. This Turandot isn't so much about Puccini's Turandot and the performers on stage. It feels as if this production wanted to celebrate the people off stage. It is, more than anything, a flashy festival of cancel culture, created by two hypertrophic egos. Kosky, who cancelled Puccini, and Viotti, who cancelled the singers. Which is, of course, why most reviews are mostly talking about them and not about the singers. Let's see if they'll also cancel this video then. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. Is this the future of opera? Or should it be its regrettable past? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.